In the summer of 1914, Germany invaded Belgium, expecting an easy road to Paris. Belgium was a smaller, neutral country, outgunned by every great power on the continent, and not expected to delay the German timetable by more than a few days. German commanders had their eyes on France. Belgium was just the corridor. What they didn't know was that a retired American colonel, rejected by his own country's military, had spent the last year selling a new weapon to the Belgians. A weapon that looked unlike anything on the battlefield. Flat spinning drum on top, strange aluminum shroud around the barrel. Light enough for one man to carry and bring into action fast, without the crew, the tripod, or the fixed position every other machine gun required. The Germans had never seen anything like it, and in those first brutal weeks of the war, when they expected to walk through Belgium, it started killing them in ways they had no answer for. They named it. Not the British, who later adopted it. Not the Americans, who invented it and then rejected it. The Germans. They called it the Belgian Rattlesnake. The story of why German soldiers feared the Lewis gun is not really about the gun's specs. It's about something much darker. The moment they realized that the way they expected to fight this war was built on a flaw they hadn't accounted for. To understand what the Lewis gun did to German soldiers, you first need to understand what it was, and what it replaced. In 1914, a machine gun was a crew-served weapon. The German Maxim, the British Vickers, these were heavy, complex instruments of slaughter that needed 4 to 6 men to operate, set up, and supply. They weighed 90 to 100 pounds with their tripods and water-cooling jackets. You did not carry a machine gun into a fight. You emplaced it. You chose your ground, dug in, and waited for the enemy to come to you. The machine gun was, in its nature, a defensive weapon, something you anchored to the ground and waited behind. Colonel Isaac Newton Lewis had a different idea. Lewis designed his gun in 1911 while still in the U.S. Army. It was gas-operated, air-cooled, and weighed 28 pounds. Not 90, not 50, 28. A single soldier could carry it at a walk, set it down, and open fire within seconds. No crew, no water jacket, no fixed position required. The U.S. Army wasn't interested. Lewis had a long-running feud with General William Crozier, the Army's chief of ordnance, and Crozier used every tool at his disposal to block the weapon's adoption. Lewis resigned his commission in disgust, later describing his treatment as being slapped by rejections from ignorant hacks. He packed his gun into a case and got on a ship to Europe. Belgium bought it. Britain licensed it. And when Germany invaded in August 1914, a small number of Lewis guns were already in Belgian hands. Rare weapons in 1914, and exactly the kind of surprise the German infantry hadn't prepared for. The German plan in 1914 was built around speed. Schlieffen's ghost demanded it. Sweep through Belgium before France could react, crush Paris before Russia could mobilize in the east. Belgium was not supposed to slow them down. It certainly wasn't supposed to have automatic weapons that could move as fast as infantry. The Lewis gun shattered that assumption in the opening weeks. German raiding parties and advance columns expected Belgian defenders to behave the way everyone expected defenders to behave. Fixed positions, static fire, predictable lines of resistance. Instead, they kept running into something different. A small group of Belgian soldiers, sometimes just one man, would appear from a position that offered no obvious place to mount a machine gun. The distinctive chattering rattle would start. Men would fall. And by the time the Germans oriented on the firing position, the shooter was gone, moving to another angle, another approach, another elevation. This was not how machine guns worked. Machine guns didn't move. They couldn't move. Their entire tactical logic was built on the fact that they were rooted to the ground. You found a machine gun position by listening for the sustained hammering from a fixed direction. You dealt with it by flanking, suppressing, or simply enduring it until it ran out of ammunition. There was a method. There was a counter. The Lewis gun weighed 28 pounds. It moved with the man who carried it. And German infantry in 1914 had no doctrine, no training, and no counter for a machine gun that behaved like a rifleman, appearing, firing, and vanishing before anyone could orient on it. They gave it a name rooted in what it felt like to face it. Sudden, from unexpected directions, fast and lethal before you could react. A rattlesnake. The Belgian Rattlesnake. Britain officially adopted the Lewis gun in October 1915, and by early 1916 it was reaching infantry battalions on the Western Front as the standard section weapon. And the tactical shift that followed was one of the most significant of the entire war. Not because of what the gun could do from behind a sandbag, but because of what it could do while moving. The Vickers required a dedicated machine gun corps. It was treated, functionally, as a piece of artillery, a weapon of position that needed to be pre-registered, emplaced, and supplied by a trained crew. It was terrifyingly effective at what it did, but what it did was hold ground. It could not take it. The Lewis gun rewrote what an infantry advance could look like. As the war went on, Lewis guns proliferated through the British line, not just at battalion level, but down to the section itself. By the later years of the war, dozens per battalion. The section gunner and his backup moved with the rifle squad, matching its pace, shifting the gun's weight to wherever the fight demanded it. The tactical doctrine that grew around this was straightforward in theory and brutal in practice. Fire and movement. One part of the section fired to suppress the German position. The other part moved. Then the roles reversed. The Lewis gun was what made the suppression part possible. Without automatic fire, men crossing open ground were simply targets. With the Lewis behind them, German heads stayed down long enough for the advance to reach the next piece of cover. Consider what this meant for a German trench raid in 1917. A raiding party crosses no man's land at night to take prisoners and collapse a section of British trench. They expect rifles. They expect maybe a fixed machine gun at either end of the trench line. Positions they've already located, already planned around. What they get instead is a Lewis gunner in the middle of the trench who picks up his weapon and moves. No warning rattle of a heavy gun being repositioned. No crew scrambling. Just a man turning a corner with 28 pounds of automatic fire and 47 rounds in the drum. German soldiers on the Western Front understand exactly what is happening. Machine gun fire from a fixed position is terrifying, but it is survivable if you know where it is coming from. The Lewis gun can show up anywhere, follow you through a trench raid, appear on a new flank in the middle of a firefight. The German response, detailed in their after-action reports, is to prioritize Lewis gunners specifically. Kill the Lewis man first. The rest of the section is manageable without him. That targeting decision is itself a form of tribute. You don't dedicate tactical priority to something that doesn't threaten you. Here is where German behavior reveals something they never said aloud. Over the course of the war, German forces captured more than 10,000 Lewis guns. This was not an accident of combat. Their infantry was explicitly instructed to seize Lewis guns from fallen British soldiers whenever possible. Back in occupied Belgium, the Germans set up a dedicated conversion factory to rechamber captured weapons from .303 British to 8mm Mauser, their own standard rifle cartridge. They wrote training manuals for the Lewis gun. They added it to their machine gun crew instruction program. Read that carefully. Germany, the country that had produced the Maxim gun, the MG08, the weapon that defined what a machine gun was supposed to be, was so impressed by a British-adopted, Belgian-proven, American-invented weapon that it built industrial infrastructure to absorb it into its own arsenal. The MG08 was a masterpiece of sustained defensive fire. German soldiers had gone to war in 1914 believing it was the last word in automatic weapons. 4 years later, they were running a conversion factory for a gun their enemies had carried across open ground and used to ambush them in their own trenches. You do not do that for a weapon you have neutralized. You do not write training manuals for a threat that no longer concerns you. German engineers who converted those 10,000 guns understood exactly what the Lewis represented. A lighter, more mobile solution to the problem of automatic fire that their own doctrine hadn't fully answered. The nickname came from fear. The factory came from respect. Together, they tell the same story. Isaac Newton Lewis was American. He designed the gun in America, tested it in America, and tried for years to get the U.S. Army to adopt it. He failed. When he finally gave up and took it to Europe, the U.S. Army didn't just decline to follow. When American Marines arrived in France in 1917 carrying Lewis guns they'd already adopted and trained on, the Army took the Lewis guns away from them and replaced them with the French Chauchat. Military historians have been unkind to the Chauchat, and the unkindness is deserved. It was widely regarded as the worst light machine gun fielded by any major power in the war. Unreliable, prone to jamming, plagued by open magazines that filled with mud in the trenches. American Marines, who had trained on the Lewis and trusted it, received French Chauchats and were sent forward anyway. Meanwhile, British sections with Lewis guns were refining the fire and movement doctrine that would become the foundation of 20th century infantry tactics. And German soldiers in the field were detailing their Lewis gun encounters in after-action reports, and carving out a factory to convert captured ones. The U.S. Army eventually received 16,000 Lewis guns by May 1918, and gave 10,000 of them to aircraft crews, not infantry. The country that invented the Belgian Rattlesnake was the last major power to fully use it on the ground. German soldiers called it the Belgian Rattlesnake because that's what it felt like to be on the receiving end. A sudden strike from a direction you hadn't tracked, too fast to respond to, gone before you could fix its position. But that fear was the surface layer of something deeper. The Lewis gun's real threat wasn't its rate of fire. The Vickers could match it. The Maxim exceeded it. Its threat was that it broke the fundamental assumption the entire tactical logic of World War I was built on, that a machine gun was a thing you defended, not a thing that attacked. German infantry doctrine in 1914 was organized around the understanding that automatic fire came from fixed positions. Positions you could locate, suppress, flank, and destroy. The Lewis gun had no fixed position. It moved with the men it was supporting. It appeared where the fight was, not where it had been pre-planned to be. Every advance German troops made against a British section equipped with a Lewis gun was an advance against a problem that relocated itself. The 10,000 captured guns, the conversion factory, the training manuals, all of it was Germany's institutional acknowledgement of a tactical truth it hadn't solved. They couldn't stop the Belgian Rattlesnake, so they tried to become it. What the Lewis gun proved would shape warfare for the rest of the 20th century. The principle it demonstrated, that automatic fire belonged with the infantry, not behind it, became the foundation of every modern infantry squad. The Bren gun that replaced it in British service was a direct descendant. The American BAR followed the same logic. The German FG-42, developed during the Second World War, shared the same core idea: portable automatic fire at the small unit level. Every squad automatic weapon that followed, including the M60 that American soldiers would carry into Vietnam, owes something to the principle the Lewis proved in the mud of Flanders. Isaac Newton Lewis got on a ship in 1913 and went to Belgium with a gun his own country didn't want. By the time the war was over, every major army in the world understood, in bone and blood, why he was right. From the fields of Belgium in 1914 to the doctrines that still govern infantry today, the Lewis gun proved something that the armies of the world spent 4 years learning the hard way. You don't win a war from a fixed position. You win it by bringing the firepower to the fight. The Belgians knew it first. The British built on it. The Germans respected it enough to name it, and capture it, and copy it. And the Americans? They learned it last, from the gun they invented and threw away. If that's the kind of story you came here for, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay close, because the weapons that changed history are almost never the ones that got the credit.